Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic, and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. One of the most powerful things you can cultivate and develop and create for yourself is self-trust. And I think it's right up there with growth mindset, where you think things that you don't know how to do are learnable skills and that you can master things. But I want to talk in this one really about this concept of self-trust, because whenever a client says, I don't trust people, usually their self-trust is really low. So what I would say is, I trust people to be them. I trust people that I have really good discernment. So I trust my own discernment. So I can usually do a pretty good job of perceiving who they are. I have cultivated an ability to be quietly present and see how people are and know how most people move and be able to generally, have a sense of how someone's going to move. And I trust myself that if I get surprised, I'm self-restoring. So I'm not leaning on a person in such a way that if they didn't turn out to be stable in that way, I would fall on my face in a way that was unrecoverable. So this would be not marrying the person after 2 weeks of a passionate online fling and you meet and there's passion and sparks and then you run off to Vegas. That would be like maybe not, having enough knowledge of them to make a really discerning choice. So there's a patience in terms of getting to know people, so I know people and I trust my discernment about them more and more over time, the more ways I see how they treat me, how they treat other people, how they participate in their life. When they're triggered and mad, how do they act? And then the self-trust is I can make really discerning good choices for myself. I can choose to move forward or back. I can choose that even if they say they want to have an experience with me, it might not be a good match for me. And self-trust, I think, really comes from being able to listen to all the different parts of yourself. So my experience of people who don't trust other people, and while they aren't putting it into those words, my sense is they don't actually underneath that have very much self-trust, is that they often don't have a way of listening to all the different parts of themselves. So I like to think, as a former engineer, I like the corporate America because, hey, I worked in corporate America. And the idea of this is for a company to be successful, the CEO, which ideally is your inner wise person, this part of you that's connected and taking counsel with your higher self, that's calm and centered and clear, and just really wants the best for you in this incarnation journey. And a little bit of a digression, I remember years ago I went to Death Valley and the guides kind of like sat me down for a serious talk, and they're like, all right, we gave you a lot of time to work this out before we brought it up, but you're not moving forward and enough is enough, and we want to bring this up to you. They said, it is totally fine that there is a part of you that is a boy crazy 16-year-old. You were super shy and incredibly awkward and dealing with early sexual trauma in your teenage years. So for a variety of reasons like unmanaged energetic sensitivity and everything else, you were not dating in high school. One relationship didn't go very well. So you were a super late bloomer on this. It's totally okay that you now have a boy crazy 16-year-old who's just really, really, really intensely, passionately engaged with all things romantic and dating and sexual, but you're letting her have too much of your time. So it's fine. She can have some of your time. But the minute that you finish your work and the things that you have to do, you're going back to running your mind around and around. And she's not a good part of you to have in the driver's seat. We would like you to put your wise woman into the driver's seat and let her kindly include this other part so she can have her experiences of romance and dating and sex and liking people and chemistry and all that stuff. Like that's super valid. I mean, let's face it. It's the first time in a lot of recorded history, other than very limited expressions, that women could be in their sexual expression without some really, really bad consequences, like the lack of protection from STDs and the potential for pregnancy. And, we really didn't have good systems, not to mention the whole, like, you could be stoned to death or you could be killed. And so for certain women in certain locations, this could be the first time out of many, many, many lifetimes where we can play in our sexuality and we can let it move without the risk of mortal consequences. And that's super cool. That being said, I was not here solely for the purpose of exploring sexuality, and the guides were just saying, like, of course, be inclusive, keep this part. We just would like you to not give her so much of your time because it's unbalanced and you've kind of gotten into a loop of this. It's not running its course and you moving on in a timely manner. And so now's a good time to have a chit chat about that. And I totally got it. I could totally see it. So ideally you have this CEO of the company, and all the different aspects of you are like different department heads that come together. And so you ideally are taking counsel with all the parts of yourself. And one way to look at this is to look to each of the 7 chakras. So each of the 7 chakras rules a different part of the human experience, and they're all equally important. So your crown chakra is interested in your soul purpose. What did you come here to do? And your root chakra is interested in safety and security and having enough food to eat and secure access to food. And it's going to be game over pretty quick for the soul if you don't have enough safety to survive, or if you're obsessed with safety to the point that accumulating money and safety and status trumps any listening to the crown chakra. You could end up pretty disappointed at the end of your incarnation because your soul wouldn't ever have gotten to experience things that weren't related to money. Likewise, the heart just wants to connect. It loves, it loves, it wants to connect. That's beautiful. But if it connects without the discernment of your 3rd chakra that'll tell you what is and is not okay with you, and you collapse your boundaries, there's going to be a lot of pain and frustration and, people moving into your house and eating all your food and, leaving you in not such a good place. And you could love them to pieces, but they might be allowed to have an impact on your life that doesn't work for you. So every single part of you has this really important counsel. And you could look at the inner wise person as sitting at the head of the table with each of the 7 chakras and asking them, what do I need to know? Another place to look at, am I, really holding a both and? We've gotten really adversarial in our society, a lot of polarization and right, wrong and good, bad and power struggles and, just it's an intense time. Those narratives are really, really out there. And it's powerful to have both and to play the mediator within yourself, to be able to hold both aspects and find a path forward that honors, different points of view. And so a really good place to look is the inner masculine and the feminine. And I'm not talking about sex or gender roles. I'm talking more about the sort of tantric view of those, that is the active principle of doing and accomplishing and creating and productivity and set a goal and work on it and, kick ass and take names. And then there's the inner side, which is more of the yin and the stillness and substance and presence. And you really need both of those parts playing nice together, because you will exhaust yourself if you go all the time and are always trying to be productive, and you will not be particularly effectual in your life if you're in stillness and procrastination and you can't take right action. And sometimes we get these pendulum swings where we overwork, and so the masculine, gets the upper hand and holds on to it, and then the pendulum swing happens when you're exhausted, and then the feminine won't move back into productivity, and you get people who overfunction and underfunction and overfunction and underfunction, and it's unpleasant on either side. It's loud inside of them, and there's a lot of stress because when they're over functioning, maybe their health is taking a hit. They're not getting the rest and the downtime and the stillness they need. So they have illnesses that are kind of stalking them and creeping up. And when they go into the real yin feminine, maybe the body's recovering and the health is recovering, but the financial world may not be being tended properly. The person may not be taking the action that they need to sustain enough income. And then you can get people who switch modes really hard in an emergency mode. So a lot of us have had the job that we really hated, but we really needed the money, and that was just part of our journey. But ideally, over time, that can be a short-term solution, but it's not real sustainable to spend 20 years working a job you hate or 50 years working a job you hate. So ideally, you're up-leveling into a more nuanced and skillful way to balance the need for making enough money, but also having enough energy and time and space to do things that aren't related to income. So going back to that CEO example, you can imagine the outcome of the company where human resources was saying, how you're treating people is illegal. You're in violation of the law. You can't do that. And the CEO is saying, I don't care if people don't work long hours. I'm going to throw things at them, and human resources is like, no, we're going to get sued. That's so illegal. Or the marketing director who's like, yes, we want to sell this thing. And engineering is saying, but we can't build the thing. That's not technology we have. We certainly can't build it on a timeline. And marketing's like, I don't care. And they go out and sell something that hasn't been developed. I was involved with a company that in order to try to stay afloat, it was a startup company. They sold something that the engineering hadn't developed, and then engineering was on this huge crush to try to get something. We kept releasing code of like, no, we have it fixed, and then it wasn't, and client was super mad. It was, it was a really intense journey because they believed they were buying something that worked, and it was actually in, alpha and beta testing, and there were a lot of things to work out. Eventually, we got a working product, and the company didn't go under, but there was a lot of stress and messiness because we weren't in integrity. There was such a need to get income in the door so that the company didn't go under, that the truthfulness was lost with marketing, and that had impacts on the relationships. That first really big customer probably not recommending the former company that I worked for to anyone else to ever do business. So the idea with this is ideally we come together in a way that we can have an all-hands meeting with ourselves, and we can have an all-hands meeting when we're not supercharged, because when we're really, really, really wanting something, we can rationalize anything. We can decide that it's a good idea to have the alcohol, even though we know that's not a good choice. It could set off a cascade of addiction, or we could reach out to the ex, even knowing that therein lies a path of tears and misery and, round and round and round. There's things that we can do. So having these all hands meetings at a moment where you're calm and centered and can call forward your inner wise person and can hold the parts that are really getting loud because there's an important need that they're really scared isn't being met. Like, if you're not participating in the world in a way that's financially viable and you don't have some kind of a container that allows that to be okay for a while, there's going to be a part of you that's yelling louder and louder. Or if there's a health issue that you're not tending to because you're over functioning and kind of in that type A perfectionism, that's going to get loud. And ideally, we get to where we don't have any part of us that's super loud, but we can pick a destiny path that's nuanced and elegant. So a really healthy, functional company with a really great staff. You have great marketing and engineering and finance and human resources, and a CEO that has the bigger vision, and everybody comes together and collaborates and has the good of the company in mind, and there are enough resources to do the things so nobody's really overworked or in that fire drill. You can have a magnificently successful company with a really elegant vision and a lot of clarity and a lot of collaboration and a lot of win-wins, and make a great deal of money. And this is the goal of the company for people. This getting all your parts together and playing for the same team is really about quality of life. And so this is a place to look if you have that story. I just don't trust people. People aren't trustworthy. And I'm like, well, you can trust people to be them. Humans like to make a lot of stories about the future, and it's worthwhile to say, we don't really know who we're going to be in the future. So you can take marriage vows, and a lot of people live their lives together. What they intend and vision and collaborate on is something that carries through. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes, the person behaves in a way that's a deal breaker. So if you have a monogamous relationship and you've promised forever to someone and they are not keeping their vow of monogamy, that might be a problem for you. You might decide that you didn't want to stay with them. Or if they developed a drug habit, or they were having anger management issues and you felt unsafe, you would want to choose again. It's wise and healthy to choose again. And so when it comes to other people, kind of knowing across the board, we can set intent, we can have something as a probable outcome. But even if I promised to pick someone up at the airport or be there for their graduation, if I ended up in the hospital, I wouldn't be able to follow through. So there's no certainty. And that's where the self-trust comes in, which is, I've got me. Like, if somebody wasn't reliable when I was expecting them to be reliable, like most of the people I have in my life, would call from the hospital to tell me they weren't going to pick me up at the airport. There's a really good chance they would see the impact on me and let me know. And it might just be such an extreme condition that they couldn't. I like to make kind assumptions before I get the story. There's a lot of just holding, like, hey, what happened here? Let's have a conversation that is emotionally intelligent and gets better results in relationships. But in general, the self-trust of, I trust my discernment. I trust myself to really see if somebody isn't being a good CEO, if their inner wise person isn't in the driver's seat, and to be like, all right, here's this friend, some years ago, friend I absolutely adored, so fun to be with, but really, really passionately addictive about some relationships with various men. She was poly, and she was going to drop me like a hot potato if we had plans or a commitment and there was a shiny opportunity for sex and connection. And it was just good to be really clear after that happened a few times. Am I willing to participate in something where that could be part of what happens? Because there's just a part of her that wants this so badly. And the part of her that genuinely deeply wants our friendship just isn't as loud and isn't as potent. There's something driving her. So don't put myself between her and that. I'll be knocked over. You'll get knocked out of the way. If somebody hasn't wrangled their alcoholism, don't tell yourself the story that they're going to be able to keep their word to you about not drinking. They're not able to keep their word to themselves about not drinking. And until they work that out, it's not personal. But it's good to have that discernment. It's good to trust people to be them and to see where they might be rationalizing and see where they might be so hungry for something that they'll be messy about it. So infidelity happens for a lot of different reasons, but one of the reasons is that somebody is so hungry to have a need met that their ethics are compromised. And sure, they're going to rationalize it before they act on that desire, but it's just good to say, is this somebody that I experience as being in a place where, they're not so hungry for something that ethics fall by the wayside or commitments fall by the wayside. So to sum up, this concept of self-trust is a really important one. So I can say genuinely, I'm a very self-trusting person. And when my head starts to spin out or I'm worried about the future, one of the things that I'll say to myself is, I trust future Katie to handle that. Like, I'm investing in future Katie being even more resourceful and elegant and aware and skillful than current Katie is, because I've been engaged in a growth path all the way along. I keep, getting feedback and doing introspection and, leaning into where can I be in more right relationship with myself. So if I'm worried about an unknown in the future, my very bright mind wants to run all the scenarios and problem solve them. But what actually shows up is never the thing I pictured. Like, most of my scary imaginings never come to pass. And if I do end up in a problem, the details look different. Like if your car breaks down, the details of what's going on are totally going to influence the best way to solve that problem. Completely different solution if you're in the desert with a satellite phone versus, in the middle of a, shopping mall. Like really, really different ways that I would solve that problem of my car isn't going forward like I would like it to. So ideally, we're being present with ourselves. We're tending who we are now, so we're not driving our health off a cliff or our money off a cliff. And if we are, that would be a good thing to correct. But if we're functioning in the world in a way that's really sustainable, it's very good to have self-trust for the future version of you being more than capable of resolving whatever shows up on their plate. And I think that's a good counter to the mind getting fearful about the future. Because when we're afraid about the future, we often assume that things will be the same or worse as they are now, and we'll have the same or fewer resources. So there's kind of this dark vision of things are going to be worse in the future. And the truth of my life is I've had an upward spiral. I find that, I've done a lot of work and a lot of discernment, a lot of choices have gone into it. And the upshot is I continue to be happier and more at grace with myself and more elegant and aligned in my life with every year that goes by. It just keeps getting better and better to be me. And one of the things I love about my mom, who's in her 70s, is that, she's happier than she's ever been. And that's cool because, it's nice to look down at the aging process and be like, wow, there are some people who are in the later years of their life really rocking it, really loving being them, really saying like, this is the best time of my life that I've ever experienced because of the peace and the right relationship I have to myself. So I'm all for investing in being in right relationship to yourself and being on a growth path and learning unconditional friendliness and learning, all of these kind of things. Because, there are also people who arrive at old age really bitter and angry and disappointed with some really deep victim stories and not a lot of availability to be resourceful or choose again or be in growth mindset or see where they could make a shift. And there are certainly circumstances that are beyond our control. And there usually is some choice that we have in this scenario. A lot of people want to kind of swing the pendulum to 0 responsibility or 100% responsibility. And I would say, it's somewhere in the middle. We usually have choice, and then there's stuff that's beyond our control, and it's a both and. And when it comes to this concept of trust, we're really wanting to know that we won't be left behind, that someone will be there. And if we have self-trust, we can say, I've got me. First and foremost, I'm committed to having me. I will be there for me. I am investing in me being a pretty cool person to help pick myself up. Future me has got this, and I trust future me will figure out how to navigate this conversation or this relationship or this, situation if it ever comes to pass. I hope never to be audited by the IRS, but I'm like, yeah, future me would figure it out if that ever came to pass. Hopefully it won't, but if it did, I can tell myself I have the self-trust. Look at what I've handled, and this is something that I would handle in the future. And that's just a good counter conversation to have with yourself if you start visualizing terrible things and imagining how you would address them. And then I'd invite you to cultivate beyond that sort of a collective trust in what other people can be relied on for. And when I really needed something from someone else and it really would make a difference, most of the time it's shown up in a big way, but a lot of times it wasn't the person that I thought would give that to me. And in the past, I had some rather lamentable views of what I was entitled to because of what I had done for other people. And the truth is, I have some really rich inner circle people, but sometimes it's someone in an outer circle who's like, I'd love to help you with that. I'd be so glad to assist you. I can help. I have a resource. And there have been people who I wasn't that close to who showed up in really big ways. And so I always like to watch, sometimes I see people, just in a really tough place. Maybe they're wrestling with a lot of addiction. Maybe they can't get themselves back into a cycle where they're earning money. And a lot of times they still end up being okay. There's things that move. People help them. There are different kinds of assistance that are available. And so in this trust, we're really wanting to feel safe in the world. And if we're trying to trust ourselves in ways that we're not actually trustworthy with ourselves, in turn, one of the ways that's probably going to be mirrored back is arguing with the reality of what other people aren't in for. So telling ourselves a story that they would do this and then being disappointed and hurt when they don't do that. And there's also totally honest surprise. Somebody could have told you they were totally there for something and then get really messy and bail at the last minute. So it's not like, oh, if you get surprised in a bad way, you should have known, that's on you. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that when we get new information, it's super useful to take it in and update the file on who we now know that person to be, so we know what to trust them for. We can trust them to be them, and we can cultivate self-trust, and we can cultivate good relationship with ourselves, and we can invest in a future version of ourselves that is even more kick-ass and amazing and resourceful to handle the things that could come up in the future. And we can review whether there's something that we should be doing now. So my exercise goals in my 40s are in no way about cosmetic results. They're a lot about, I want to age well. I want to be able-bodied, and things can happen. Sometimes it's not up to me, but the choices that I'm making about the food I eat and the exercise I get and the strength training I wrangle myself into doing has a lot to do with investing in setting future Katie up to really, really enjoy her life. And that's something you can pay attention to. You can ask yourself the question, is there something that's in, the important but not urgent quadrant that I want to get around to putting more attention on? That's a really valid question. But in general, if you're on an upward spiral of greater self-trust, you're probably being in increasingly good relationship to yourself. And if you're not lying to yourself about who you are or ignoring other parts of yourself, you're unlikely to lie about who other people are. So this deepening of relationship to self, where you know what you can rely on yourself for and you know what you can't rely on yourself for. Like, I am not a reliable person for RSVPs for group events, and the people who invite me, I have conversations with them and I'm like, I love that you're inviting me. I love the idea of coming, but I have no idea whether I'll have the energy to deal with the massive stimulation that goes with being in a group of people that may be drinking or partying or having a big experience. It could be a blast. I could have an amazing time. But I might be on the introvert side of the scale and it just might feel like too much. So I might bail at the last minute, and you should just know that about me. If I'm officiating your wedding, I'm not going to bail at the last minute no matter how tired I am. But for group events, I know myself that I'm unreliable. So I negotiate with people so that we can all trust me to be me, which is unreliable about RSVPs to group events. On the other hand, I'm extremely reliable for showing up for client sessions, as long as people figure out the time that I'm in Pacific time. So if you're on the East Coast, you call in 3 hours early, not so much. But for the time that I have understood us to be getting together, I'm super reliable for that. And so I know what I can trust myself for and what I can't trust myself for. And from there, again, I don't need to feel untrusting of other people. I trust myself. I trust my discernment. I trust them to be them. I trust myself to make really good choices based on who they are. And the end result is a lot of joy and harmony and success and mutual support and win-wins and a really thriving experience of feeling held and supported by other people in my life. So I just want to offer this to you. It's subtle wisdom. There's a lot here, but if you start to hold that anchor of self-trust and explore what that means for you. And again, it's not being an island. I'm not saying like I'm only going to rely on myself. I would like to rely on myself first. I have the most control over that. But it's about a flowing, open, I've got me. and being able to move from that. So I want to offer this to you because I think if this is something that you're prizing, it'll bring your awareness back to it, just like the growth mindset instead of fixed mindset, where you're not just thinking, I am the way I am and that's the end of it. You're thinking, well, skills are learnable. I might never be able to be successful enough at learning a skill to be Olympic level good, but I could be quite competent at something that didn't show up as a natural talent or I didn't get trained in originally. So these are some touchstones that I think are really powerful for conversations to have with yourself that put you on a really sustainable path and that cause some relaxation, that cause some all is well, I've got this, I've got me. And I think that that's an immensely valuable sort of thing. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.